If you're working 18-hour days to keep a 50-person company alive, one that wouldn't survive a 2-week vacation without you, you're not building an asset, you're building a cage. You're the smartest person in the room, but you're the chief bottleneck, the single source of failure. Your stress isn't the African market, but your business design. We're trying to build 50-store skyscraper and a bungalow floor plan. My name is Adewumi-Zer, and I'm the founder and CEO of Zer Consultant Africa. 20 plus years, flew across the globe, driving hundreds of millions of euros of growth for massive institutions. When I moved back to Lagos, I realized the only thing missing for a billion African institutions was not purpose, it wasn't passion, it wasn't innovation or hard work, it was precision. I saw the precision of multi-billion-dollar institutions in Germany. But I'm here to show you that the only thing missing for your business is the right floor plan. Just give me 30 minutes and I'll give you the exact one-pager that I use to move founder-less hustle to institution, but a blueprint. Even my Skyscraper Strategy blueprint is useless if you don't know where the ground is shifting. Before you move on, stop. Click on the link in the description. Take the SCALE Scorecard, and in just 5 minutes, you'll know where your foundation is leaking. Once you have your diagnosis, we'll use a blueprint to plug the holes. If you're following along the blueprint, look at the very first column. That's where we begin. But before we move on, in my time moving around the world, I've seen hundreds of strategies. I've seen massive PowerPoint documents. I've seen huge word memos, many of them gathering dust. What's the difference? If those is the execution. Because strategy without execution is simply a dream. Because most founders say, and many CEOs even think scaling means working harder, putting in those hours, dropping that sweat, not sleeping at night, not knowing that effort alone will never fix a problem. Because scaling is a choice you make before growth starts. You decide today whether you're building a bungalow or a skyscraper. Now, you and I are going to walk step by step the 5 phases of my Skyscraper Strategy blueprint. By the time we're done, you won't just have a strategy, you'll have your life back. And if you're ready to exit the hustle, like this video, subscribe and hit that bell. Before this, another founder is drowning in their business. Now let's get to work on phase 1, assessment and visioning. Most African founders don't have a strategy, they have a reaction. If you can't describe the exact gap between where you want to be in 5 years and where you are today, you're not leading, just a passenger in your own business. You're moving fast or you're moving in circles. If your team's exhausted, yet your revenue remains flat, it's because your floor plan is missing a foundation. In Germany, I learned that 100 million euro institution is never an accident. It's a result of first principles, because you can't build if you haven't measured. Now, if you're following along in the strategy blueprint, look at phase 1. This is where we stop measuring and start guessing. What we get in this phase is absolute clarity. At the end of this exercise, your team will have a shared vision for the future and a mission statement that acts as a structural anchor. No more confusion, no more wasted energy. If you haven't yet, pause this video. Take it to the SCALE Scorecard, linked in the description. It will tell you if your S pillar, strategize, is really your biggest leak. Now, let's dive into the blueprint. You should all have it up. We're looking at the first column, looking at phase 1, strategy assessing and visioning. First thing you need to do is you need to review your previous strategy. Now, when you're reviewing your previous strategy, this is about reviewing where you won, but also where the challenges were. And it's not about regrets. It's not about finger pointing and trying to cast blame, but really just wanting to understand. So we set out to do X and we only got to Y. What was the reason for that gap and what do we need to adjust to make sure that we can plug that gap in the future? Now you've reviewed your previous strategy. Next is to conduct a gap analysis. What is a gap analysis? Gap analysis says, look at where I want to be in 10 years. What's my vision for the company in 10 years? And now 10 years is a long way away. Where do I want to be in 3 years? 3 years time. That's more management vision, and even to hit that 3-year goal, where do I want to be in next year? Looking at where that desired state, whether it be 10 years, whether it's in 3 years, whether it's at the end of this year, and where am I currently? And finding where those gaps are, because that's where we have to focus on in terms of closing those gaps. But we have internal resources, right? We are good at some things. It's not all bad. And so looking at these competencies, these resources, these capabilities, and as you're doing that, also looking at a market, right? Because we're not playing in silos, we're playing in a market. Looking at our competitors, analyzing the industry landscape, looking at what other companies are doing, whether we're calling them competitors, whether we're calling them collaborators, also looking at potential opportunities and threats. And this is really where we do what we call a SWOT analysis. This is a topic we can go into in another day. We have that. The outcome of all this should really be a shared vision for the company. You've done this hopefully with your leadership team, or maybe even with the entire company. If you have a smaller company, you have a shared vision for the future. You know where you want to be in 10 years. You know where you want to be in 3 years. You know where you want to be at the end of this year. And you decided that together. It's a shared vision. And then based on that, what is your mission statement? Good. Now we got through phase 1. What we've learned is that reviewing your strategy isn't about regret. It's a prerequisite for growth. Secondly, your unique resources are your only sustainable advantage in a competitive African landscape. Thirdly, external analysis identifies threats before they become a crisis. In Munich, they call that risk mitigation. Here in Lagos, we call that survival. Which part of your foundation is currently shifting? Let me know in the comments. And then subscribe for this video on to your leadership team. Move on now to the phase 2, which is about goal setting. You're hitting your monthly targets. Your business feels just as fragile as it did 3 years ago. Why? Because your goals are too soft to be backable. You set operational milestones, but you haven't yet set strategic objectives. If an investor walked into your office today, would they buy your systems, or would they just be buying your personal exhaustion? I worked in Germany. We didn't just set goals to do better. We set goals to be ready for the market, ready for the board, ready for an exit. If you're following along in the strategy blueprint, then look at the second column, phase 2. This is where we move from hope to smart objectives. When we get to this phase, it's a board-ready set of KPIs. By the end of this exercise, you'll have specific metrics that track your progress towards total investment readiness. You'll finally know what your business is worth, how to make it worth more. But before you define your new goals, you must know where the foundation is cracked. Take the SCALE Scorecard linked in the description. It takes only 5 minutes to show if your goals are aligned with your vision. Use that diagnosis to then fill in phase 2 of the blueprint. Now let's dive into the blueprint, where we use investment as our North Star. Phase 2, looking at the second column, goal setting and strategic objectives. Now, if you recall from this first column in phase 1, where we looked at assessing where we were today, setting a vision and a mission based on that assessment. How do we now translate that vision? Our vision is nice, but without execution, doesn't mean much. How do we send that vision into strategic KPIs? We need to identify those strategic goals. So we need to identify and then use that identification to create what we call SMART goal. That's SMART. So that's specific, that's measurable, that's A, achievable, R, relevant, and then T, time bound. Each of those KPIs has to fit that SMART category of specific, of measurable, of achievable, of relevant, of time bound. And then you develop those SMART objectives and then really define who our key investors are, who our target investors are, and what is the ideal timeline for their investment. And what this helps us do is to understand what that potential investor or partner, what are they looking for? What type of companies do they invest in? What would we need to change? What would we need to adjust to be able to fit into that type of company? And then we know based on our timeline, how much time that we have to do that. So we build that all into our KPIs so that we know that, for example, if we're looking to to exit in 3 years, what do we need to achieve? And what kind of KPIs do we need to set in those 3 years, in year 1, in year 2, in year 3, smart objectives so that we can hit that vision of the company for that potential investor in 3 years. Now we have, at the end of this phase, specific KPIs to track progress to investment readiness. Because remember, to scale an institution, our goals must move beyond quarterly survival to institutional grade architecture. You need total alignment with your vision. You need a defined exit timeline. You need a ruthless focus on profitability. Because at the end of the day, we're looking at long-term profitability. We're looking at market position. That is our goal when we're building a business. This is the path to freedom. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how investment ready are your goals? Drop a number in the comments. Be honest. And if you're ready to build a backable asset, subscribe and forward this to your CFO. And to see how we turn these goals into a living measurement system, let's move to the next phase. We look at execution planning. And the full strategic roadmap is available. Look at the video, click on it for the full executive roadmap. Now you have a brilliant strategy on paper. So your team is still winging it. They have meetings that lead to more meetings. At the end of the month, you're still the only one doing the heavy lifting to get us over the finish line. If your business collapses the moment you stop pushing, you don't have a strategy. You have a personality cult. You're trying to hold up a 15-story skyscraper with your bare hands because you're building a skeleton. And as I worked across the globe, I've seen in established multinationals, the system is the hero, not the founder. I've seen billion-dollar institutions run with the precision of a Swiss watch, as the execution planning was non-negotiable. I brought that precision back to Africa to show you that the only thing missing for your business is an internal framework. What we get now in this phase 3, is visibility and velocity. By the end of this exercise, we'll have detailed action plans and a performance measurement system that measures your progress towards your strategic goals and M&A KPIs. You'll finally have a business that runs like a machine, not a business that runs you. Let's move into our blueprint. Let's pull it all up in front of us, and where we see that visibility actually creates velocity. Looking at phase 3, we see that phase 3, strategy development and execution planning, where we're taking the outcomes from phase 1, where we looked at vision and mission, to phase 2, where we have KPIs, smart KPIs. And now we have to move to execution, because again, strategy without execution is just a dream. Looking at creating detailed action plans for each of those KPIs. Today we have 3 KPIs. 3 KPIs is good for 1 year. So we have 1, 2, 3 KPIs. What we need to do is create an action plan, quarterly action plan for ideal, monthly, can be whatever time frame you feel is right, for each of those action plans. For us, we'll do quarterly. So quarterly 1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. And of course, we need to have responsible people for each of those actions. We have person 1. So we have KPI 1, Q1, person 1. We have KPI 1, Q2, person 2. It can also be the same person or a different person in this case. Still the same KPI, quarter 3, person 3, and then same KPI, quarter 4, person 4. And we do the same thing for each of its KPIs. So for the second KPI, split into quarters, we need action for each quarter, what is responsible person for each quarter, KPI 3, again, each quarter, responsible person for each quarter. And then how do you actually then measure? That's the next step. So we have the action plan. Now we need to measure the progress on this action plan, and how do we actually report it back so that there's visibility, not just to the leadership team, but even the entire company, particularly the board, as to our progress on each of these actions for the full action plan. So then the outcome is then a detailed action plan. And then we have the measurement system that has been agreed for this action plan. And then, of course, the reporting mechanism for this action plan. And then that gets us into phase 3. And then, of course, at the end, you want to check whether this plan is realistic. Is there opportunity? Is there immediate action? And is structure resilient? Going back to that war framework that we had discussed in a different video. Let's remember, institutional precision requires a structural skeleton. can't hold it with your bare hands. And then you have to convert those strategic objectives into detailed action plans, and then measure the progress with a robust measurement system, and then have oversight via a regular reporting mechanism that keeps the board aligned and you as a founder free. What's the one task that you're doing today that can be taken over by a system? Drop me a comment, let me know. Be interested. And of course, if you're tired of being the only edge in your business, subscribe for the CEO Chief Operating Officer. You see what they say. And now let's see how we get this whole skeleton permitted and approved by the board. That's the next phase in finalization. If your strategy though is only living in your head or in a messy folder on your desktop, doesn't exist. To move now to institutional scale, you need what I like to call a permit. We need to get board approval. Without formal documentation, without board approval, your team is just waiting for you to change your mind. It's just your mood. You're building a skyscraper in a high growth market. Mood is a risk that no investor will touch. And during my time in Germany, the strategy document was a contract. I've managed growth for institutions where the permit process was even more important than the idea itself, because it ensured total alignment. I brought that same standard of precision here to help you move from whim to mandate. Now we're going into the strategy blueprint. You're following along, right? We're looking at the fourth column, which is phase 4. And what we get in this phase is an approved strategy execution document, because we have the strategy, we have the execution plan, but now we need it to get approved. And by the end of this exercise, you'll have validated financial projections and an executive mandate. This document is your shield, protects the vision from distractions, and forces the organization to move as one. Is your current strategy boardroom ready? Stop now, take the SCALE Scorecard. It's in the description. Click on that link. If your scorecard shows a low score in either strategy or leverage, your board is not the problem. Your lack of a permit is. Once you have the diagnosis, now we can use a blueprint to fix it. Let's now move to the blueprint. Let's pull it up. So all of us pull it up. Now here we know that approval is the pivot. For board approval, we need the final strategy documents. There's a number of things we need. We need to get the final strategy documents. So we have this. It's the strategy document. And so then that will include an executive summary, because of course we're dealing with busy board members. Of course, it'll have the SMART objectives that we created in phase 2. We'll have the action plans that we created in phase 3. And the financial projections that have been built on the back of those action plans. And this will all be presented to the board for final review and approval. And once you have that approval from the board, of course, this needs to be communicated back to your team, and then to develop a communication plan so that you can really disseminate it further down into the company so that we have everybody on the same page. What we have at the end, we have checked off, we have an approved strategy, we have financial projections, and we have a comp plan, all ready to go and ready to move us into phase 5. Let's remember to build a skyscraper. That's what we're here for. We're here to build a skyscraper. You need the permit of authority. Your financial projections have to be credible in order to be bankable. Your board presentation is a tool for institutional alignment, not just a formality. It's not a checkbox exercise. An internal comms plan has to ensure the vision is never lost. Translation from the boardroom to the front line. That's true governance. When's the last time your board actually signed off for your 3-year roadmap? Tell me the year in the comments. Come on, keep it honest. And then if you're ready to get that permit for SCALE, then like, subscribe, forward this video onto your board chair. And to see how we get the whole team moving into the same building, let's move on to phase 5, stakeholder engagement. Now, you built the blueprint, you've set the goals, and you've got the board's approval, but nothing has changed. Your team isn't resisting you. They just don't understand you. If your strategy doesn't have a shared language, your expansion will fail before it even starts. Expansion requires an ecosystem, not just a founder's degree. Across the world, I've seen how $100 million institutions treat stakeholder engagement as a technical requirement, not just a soft nice to have, because they know it's a force multiplier that turns a plan into reality. I brought this back to Africa to show you that your impact depends on who's building with you. If you're following along on the strategy blueprint, look at the final column, phase 5. What we get in this final phase is total support. By the end of this exercise, you'll have both internal and external stakeholders who don't just know the strategy, they own it. Let's move to that final column in the strategy blueprint. Hope we all have it in front of us, and where we see it's about communication and stakeholder engagement. Such a critical piece, and a piece that can sometimes be completely overlooked. And it's just split into two simple areas. It's split into internal communications and external communications. Very simple. The first thing we need to do when we have a new strategy, a new action plan, board approved, is that we need to communicate it to all the employees. Get everybody on the same page. Make sure that everyone understands what the game plan is, and then help them to be able to actually action on those plans. Give people responsibilities, but give them the capabilities to be able to deliver on those responsibilities. That's where we provide training and development. So, internal communication, training and development. Now, where do we go with the externals? Now, with the externals, it's again communication. Every relationship is about communication. Start with communication. And of course, build relationships with partners who can actually help you to implement that strategy. Internal, we have about communication, and then training and developing your employees to be able to actually deliver on that strategy. And then on the external side, again, around communication, then finding those strategic partners that can help you as a company deliver on that same strategy. And at the end of the day, the outcome we want is both internal and external understanding and support. Not just understanding, but support of that strategy. So here we've come then to the 5 phases. We started with phase 1, where we were looking at the past, measuring our gaps, seeing where we could plug those gaps with our core competencies, also testing where the market was and what we would have to do with there. Moving then to phase 2, where we talked about goal setting, smart objectives, being able to measure where we are against what investors are looking for. Moving to phase 3, where we have to come with action plans and execution on those smart objectives, which need to be measured, it needs to be reported. Phase 4 is getting that permit from our board so that we can get that final approval and be able to also know the finances, how this will drive the financials of the company. And finally, the ever important phase 5, where we need to communicate, not just internally, but externally, so that everyone's on the same page, that everyone understands the strategy and actually supports the strategy. So tell me, which phase of your skyscraper is currently missing? Is it phase 1, where we set the foundation, or is it phase 5, where we communicate and engage? Be honest with yourself. Let me know in the comments. And if you found this full blueprint useful, like this video, comment with the phase you need to fix, and subscribe with the notification bell. Finally, forward this to a board member or fellow founder who's also stuck in the hustle trap. And finally, now that your strategy is locked, watch the next video to see how we apply it to your governance structure, the true key to freedom.